Hello and welcome to the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy. So today we have two school counselors from Joseph Case Junior High School with us, Monique Grauer and Alyssa Matthew. And we're here to discuss bullying and social and emotional learning skills. So we're really excited to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such an important topic. But before we begin our conversation, I want to thank our sponsor, Bay Coast Bank. Bay Coast Bank is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. As always, you can support the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy by subscribing to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please remember to leave a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. Well, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Why don't we start with that?
Sure. So my name is Alyssa Matthew. I am a school counselor in Swansea, Massachusetts. And I started out my counseling journey back in 2004 at Framingham State College. I got my undergrad degree there. I went on to Cambridge College, where I got a master's degree in school adjustment counseling and mental health counseling. Nice. So I have had quite a few different opportunities throughout the mental health counseling world. And finally, about 7 years ago, ended up at the middle school where I was destined to be pretty much. I had known since probably high school that that's what I wanted and where I wanted to end up. So I was really grateful to end up there. And I've loved the 7 years that I've been there. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
And yourself?
Yeah. So I started off in teaching. So I started off as a special educator in 2003, I think. It's been that long. And I taught for about 10 years. And in special ed, I taught history, social studies. And then about, I guess, 2014, I switched. I got my master's in school counseling at Providence College. And from there, I got a position open at our middle school in the district. And the rest is history. So I've been there ever since.
So most school counselors are master's level. Is that right? Okay.
Yep. You have to have your master's to be a school counselor.
Okay.
I ended up going and getting my CAGS degree too. So it's an extension of your master's in holistic mental health counseling as well. Just
That's
keep
great.
up the yeah. So it's been really helpful for sure. I just really loved, in teaching, I loved the connecting with children and teaching's great, but I really liked helping them, move through obstacles and help with social problem solving and things like that. So when this opportunity came up, I knew it was a good fit.
That's great.
And middle school, those are tricky years. I mean, they're kind of growing out of being that kid into being like an adult. That's a big transition.
I know. It's interesting you say that. Right before I was here, I came in tonight, I bumped into a student at the store, a former student who's now in high school. And, it was great to see them. And they said, wow, you saw me at my worst.
I've heard that at time or two.
I know. And I said, oh my gosh. Yes. And, you don't realize how many people you impact because it's such a blip on the radar, but it's a really, really interesting time. There's a lot of changes. So from 6th to 8th grade, it's a huge difference, socially, emotionally, physically. They're just, trying to figure out who they are. It's never a dull moment.
I really like that statement that you just made. You made it so casually, too, like you don't realize the impact that you have. And it's just like those little sentences. One of the people who impacted me the most was my fourth. Right. Well, you, of course, you're at the top of the list, but was my 4th grade teacher. Yeah. And, it was just like something simple that he said that like really just switched my whole outlook totally a 180 degrees, or else I would have been very miserable, not the happy person you see in front of you.
I know.
Well, thank God that you had that experience then.
Yeah, truly. So bullying.
Yeah, let's talk about it because it's such an important topic.
So I think, the term bullying today looks a lot different than it looked in years past when we were in school even. a lot of what we see today is more so the cyberbullying, and also the kind of like minute little digs that come out at times, right? So not so much the physical, not so much the, the real big blowouts, but more so kind of that like under the radar stuff, and the online stuff where it's easier to really, say whatever you want to say without any kind of second thought of who's on the other end. So, we see a lot of that filter into school. We have a lot of kids that will come in and talk with us about something that may have happened nights prior, and then just the concern of how their day is going to be impacted by that as well once they're
So
at
let me
school.
ask you this question. Does the physical bullying still exist in schools? Because that's all we experienced kind of when we were, at that age. I don't know if you did, but for boys, it was pretty common. There was a lot of physical bullying that
It's more
occurred.
like click stuff, like
Yeah.
clicky stuff, and you
Yeah.
being like feeling like you were excluded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
And
Yeah.
that the physical bullying we don't see as much. Are there kiddos who are aggressive towards each other at times? Yes, but usually that is something that's mutual. We see.
Right.
Not that does not happen. So I don't want to say that doesn't happen, but what we see on a daily basis is the cyberbullying, but also like the emotional stuff, like planned ignoring. So let's not sit with them at the lunch table. Let's not invite them to that sleepover tonight, or kind of ganging people up against, other students to try to, the dynamics are very, very challenging in middle school per se.
Sure.
You're trying to figure out who you are within a group,
Right.
in relation to yourself, more so than you are even within your family unit at this age. Developmentally, it's developmental. You are trying to figure out who you are within your peer group.
Absolutely.
That's your hormones. That's the neuroscience behind it. Really, I think the kiddos are trying to figure out who they are.
And that's probably, you don't think of it like that because our world, being way old, is like the whole world,
You're a little older,
but like
yeah.
their world is just like their little school and their little family unit. So
Right.
something goes wrong at school and that's all their relationships,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think too, that it's such a huge piece for them is that peer acceptance, There are some kids who will go home from school and be totally fine sitting in their room, ignoring their whole family, right? But if there's that little bit of discomfort within their peer group, that's what we're hearing about. Those are the concerns because that's really, that's all that they're really harping on and thinking of most of the time because they want that acceptance. I mean, family is family, I think, and they know that they're there, but figuring out who their friends are is really where they're at and what they're trying to figure out for sure.
That's a really good point, though, you make. It's interesting. A lot of kids are like that, aren't they? They go home and, they may not interact as much with their family. With their peers are completely different people.
Right.
It's interesting.
My niece, who I'm super close to, is 15, and she went to a new school this year as a sophomore, and she wouldn't eat in the cafeteria. And she's a very happy, popular kid in her old school.
Why wouldn't she eat in the cafeteria?
She didn't know anyone, and she didn't want to. She was intimidated by the whole cafeteria scene, not knowing where to sit, who to sit
the
with.
Cafeteria can be a huge source of discomfort for
She ended up eating in the library for the first 3 weeks, or just skipping lunch and going to the library for the first 3 weeks till she could kind of find a friend base, you know. And it's you don't think of things like that.
I think that's one of the big things too. Ms. Grauer and I are the prime. The people that register students, but then also welcome them into the school if we have new students. And one of the biggest things I think we can agree on is, okay, what class do they have lunch? Who's in that class? Let's make sure that we find somebody that they can get to know the first few periods of the day so they have somebody to sit with because we know that that's such a difficult time.
I think that's so great that you think of that because that was, and like I said, she's pretty well adjusted and pretty popular. And it's
really
for
hard.
her, that surprised me when she said how intimidated she was.
It is. And I know during COVID, they had assigned seating, right? For obvious purposes, right? So we knew where kids were sitting in case anybody got sick.
Right.
Now it's back to the normal way. And I know too, I think I've noticed it even more this year. I think kids are behind a couple years socially and emotionally. So now an 8th grader or a 7th grader who has already had to navigate that lunchroom is now doing that for the first time, right? So those skills, those opportunities to solve those problems don't exist. So where your niece who's 15, when COVID was happening and there wasn't a lot of lunchroom socialization,
Right.
she probably didn't have a lot of practice with that.
Right.
So we're almost reteaching kiddos how to be together. And I know we spoke about it a little bit, but during COVID, it was like, wow, there's a lot of really serious stuff happening. However, those little minute things that kids are supposed to go through at this stage of life just weren't happening. Those
Right.
opportunities to problem solve, even with the bullying, even with the how to handle conflict.
Right.
So we do a lot of that too. So in each grade level, we kind of address different things, right? So in 6th grade, it's more like conflict resolution. So how can you be a welcoming 6th grader in our community? What happens when you have a problem? So we go into the classroom, we do little lessons, we talk about that. And then in 7th grade, it's more coping strategies. So we try to help them navigate, okay, so now you have this hard thing going on. How do you handle it? How do you cope with it? Because as we know as adults, you can do wonderfully academically and career-wise, but if you don't have the coping skills to handle with setbacks and handle your coworkers, your peers,
Day problems of any kind.
Yeah, it's very hard.
I think that's great because sometimes they may not get the direction at home on how to cope, or their parents may not have those skills to help them with.
Yeah.
So just that you have that in the programming.
Right.
Well,
is-
and a lot of kids may feel uncomfortable speaking to
Of course.
their family too. I mean, that age, particularly, a lot of times they kind of close in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
And I know, I mean, in my experience as a child, I don't remember having a conversation about coping skills with my mom, you know.
Or my counselor.
But no,
It's such a different
no,
world.
it really is,
really
you know,
is.
and majority of the parents that we have right now are about our age. So they didn't go through that either.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about that a lot, how there's a lot of things that, you know, we know because we're in the field day after day and, you know, obviously have the education behind it as well and the experience. But for parents, I mean, a lot of it is just like not even knowing some of the stuff I think that is so important today.
Yeah.
And I don't think we understand, I mean, what kids go through with this. I remember at one point, one of my daughters, and she was, you know, probably middle school. I'm thinking back, it was probably middle school. You know, she was in tears crying about some mean thing that someone had left on the internet, you know, and, you know, it's hard to even comprehend why that is such a big issue when you're an adult, but
Right.
when you're a teenager, that's a really big issue. Even as an adult, it's kind of
Yeah.
distressing when people do things like that. But
Of course.
but we didn't have the experience. There was this stuff didn't exist way back when, and we didn't have school counselors who talked about this stuff either, which is great that you do because we didn't really have that growing
Yeah.
up.
No, I remember clearly my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot. I was the new kid a lot.
Oh, geez.
And in middle school, the last time we moved, and I was in 8th grade. And so that was a really hard time. And I struggled. And except for maybe the orientation into the school, there was no, hey, you're new here. How are you
Right.
doing? What's going on at lunch? And it was really hard. And I think about that a lot, especially when it's a busy day and it's like, how am I going to get all this stuff done today? How can I, I think about that. I'm like, wow, if you can just do what you can do to help one kid today, you're doing okay. Because, and that's just, now we have the information, right? Now we have the information. We know that kiddos need extra support at school, not just academically, but emotionally to get through.
How do you deal with everything? Because the world is so very different. And now you have all these reality shows where being mean is almost okay,
Glorified, actually.
Yeah. So what are the first steps? How do you teach them?
I think I think for us, we have to be present for them. So that's number one. Just like anything, you're not going to be any good to anybody else if you can't just work on yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a constant reflecting on our own self and our practices and with each other, and just really opening and just listening to them and just making them feel important.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's not even what you say. It's just being that, being a person that's going to listen to whatever they have going on, and eventually there is the problem solving piece of it. But for them, I think a lot of it too is just being able to open up to someone that's not, necessarily a parent or someone in their family to get kind of that clear perspective who maybe gets it a little bit more, just having dealt with it. I know I reference a lot with students, like, I've been through this before with kids. Like, it's totally normal. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll make a plan. We'll do what we got to do,
That
So
must just kind of
think
calm
that
it
in
down a
itself,
little bit.
can definitely
Just
be,
knowing that they're not the only
Right.
ones that have ever gone through this.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. And, controlling the controllables, right? And that's a lot of it is just, they're trying to solve everything too. And so it's like, all right, one step at a time.
What are the controllables?
I mean, I think, from your basic needs being met, you're eating, you're sleeping, all the things, a doctor would say too. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Are you exercising?
Yeah.
Starts there.
Right.
Who do you keep surrounded? Who do you keep in your circle? Do you feel good when you're with those people? Are you bringing each other up? Are you bringing each other down?
Alyssa, what happens if you have a child who is aggressive and is causing some other kids some problems? Like, how do you deal with that child?
Yeah, do you deal with
The
that?
opposite side.
Yeah, right,
kind of.
exactly.
That I would say is usually more of a team effort with our assistant principal as well. As
I love that
And the
answer.
parents as
and
well.
the parents.
Yeah.
I definitely, typically I think if something is reported to us, we will, work with that student reporting the situation, and then probably work with the assistant principal to do some investigation to kind of assess the whole situation, and then as well as the parents in addition to that. So we definitely play a part of it. When it comes to disciplinary type stuff, that's beyond us. That's for our assistant principal
Right, right.
Sure.
to handle. But we usually are there to support both sides realistically, because the other student clearly has something, that they might need some
Something going
support with if they're acting that way. So we, I think we have a really good team where we are, and we can work really well. We will try to kind of come at it from both sides so that, we can kind of share the responsibilities there, and like who's working with who. And, we have a certain way that we divide up the school, but we're always able to, like as far as who is our students or who are our students. But, we work really well together to be able to work through those problems if there is like more of a situation.
So let me take a step back just for our audience, and let's define bullying. I think it's important to do that because I think everyone has a sense of what it is, but I think it's good to get the definition out there.
Yeah.
I would say so. It's physical, emotional, cyber. I'm forgetting one.
Emotional cyber. Social.
Social, right? And it's in any situation where there's a power imbalance, right?
Okay.
So that's how we define it. So a lot of times, definitely in middle school, there's conflicts that happen. And within a conflict, you can mediate. We can sit you down. You can talk about what's going on. You can come up with a solution. If we decide that there's a bullying situation happening, it means that the victim is feeling inferior to the bully. Like
Okay.
they feel they have no power. So
Okay.
if that's what's happening, that's what, that's how we, so then we
It's
open
also
up.
typically like a repeated
event.
issue.
Repeated.
So if we have that situation come up and the mediation doesn't work or isn't possible and things continue to happen again and again, I mean, that's a clear sign at that point that this is more than just a conflict.
Right.
So from the perspective of the person being bullied, I'm guessing this is like a very isolating type of
Yes.
experience. So they're feeling that power differential and they must feel very alone, I'm guessing,
Absolutely.
with all of that. That must be a big part of it.
Right. And so we try to teach our community, if you see something, say something, right? That would be with anything. So if we see a student, if you see one of your peers struggling, if you're online and there's a group chat going on and it's going not in a good way or in favor
Yeah.
to another, everybody's ganging up on someone, the person's asking that person to stop. Instead of saying nothing, don't be a bystander. Tell a trusted adult. Right? Stick up for that person. Send that person a text after and say, hey, I saw that happening to you. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? How can I help you with that? Because it is very isolating. And a lot of times the victim won't come forward. It's usually a friend. So it's really important that the kids are armed with that knowledge. Like if they, what to look out for what does it look like? What does it feel like? And what to do.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you.
I'm stealing the question.
That you go ahead.
There's so many of them.
It's a big topic.
I know. I know. Do you? Now I forgot what my question was.
Oh, good. I'll go to mine.
No, wait. I think I got it back.
Okay.
Do you find that kids are very reactive? Like if someone says something, they're going to say something back right away, or it's like I tend to see the younger people in my life that are like 10 to 14, like they're on their phones and man, they're not letting one text go by without like answering it.
Oh, the pressure.
Yeah, I would definitely say that there's a reaction there. I think there's very few students I've come across that can kind of just like let it be and walk away. I think especially in the online world, because it is so easy to put anything out there. And even I think in person, there are students who the minute something happens will try to come down and be like, this just happened.
That's a difficult skill to learn.
Yeah.
It takes probably about 40 years for most people
100%.
to sort that out.
It's hard for adults to even
Absolutely.
handle conflict.
But one of the questions I had was, when you look at bullying and you look at the outcomes, the long-term effects, can we talk about that a little bit so, I can understand and our audience can understand what this all leads to?
So I think if bullying not gone, that goes undetected, that's unsupported, right? That leads to higher levels of depression, anxiety, social isolation, and just overall health and well-being, right? It affects all of that, I think, especially if you grow up thinking there's, you're not liked or you're not accepted for who you are, and you don't have an identity. I think that's what bullying does for a lot of these kids who then become adults, is that it tears at their identity of who they are. They're always questioning, is this good enough? Is this who I should be? Because this is who I was rejected before.
Great point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, definitely that it definitely affects adulthood.
So it has far-reaching effects years down the road if there's not an interaction or an intervention, I should say, that takes place.
And we do often a lot refer to outside counseling a lot. So we have a wonderful list of resources for parents and families to have, especially when kiddos are feeling anxiety, depression, whether it's because of bullying or whether it's because it's hard. Life is tough sometimes for these kiddos.
Of course.
Trying to navigate social media alone is really hard. It's
crazy.
A lot of these apps and stuff are made for adults. The algorithms are for adults, but we have these children who are using them, and it's such a big world to navigate, and they don't know how to handle it.
So there's a big difference between a 6th grader and an 8th grader. How do you deal? Like, what are the best strategies to use with each of those age groups?
I mean, I would say, the 6th graders definitely come in feeling a lot more elementary, and they kind of have to hold their hand a little bit more to get them through. I think you definitely see a turning point towards the end of the year, and then once 7th grade rolls around, they all kind of have their own I don't know what the word is, but attitude, I guess, in a sense, of, how they kind of feel at school and approach school. The 8th graders, I think you can be a little bit more logical with and use okay, I know you're only in 8th grade, but we're planning for your future here already, so really trying to talk about those bigger pictures that we're working towards. I think for the 6th graders, it's a little harder to do some of that because it seems so far off. But really, even the 7th graders, you can kind of start with that because we do already start to talk about, some future planning at that age, which is kind of crazy. But we have students who want to go to different types of high schools and things like that. Yeah. So their behavior and their academics and all of that are going to need to be reflective of, some good stuff to get in there. So.
What are some specific things that you'll say to the kids to help them through like a cyberbullying event?
I so many, but I think a good place to start is, if you see something, so is it kind? Is it necessary? If you're about to post something, what are you thinking before that? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Right? Is it hurtful? Then don't post it. If someone's doing that to you, you block.
Yeah.
Oh. You block them. You delete the chat. you walk away. It's really hard for kiddos, especially in the 6th grade. Their impulse control isn't
Right.
their brains are
Right.
still really developing.
Right.
For them to be able to walk away from that is really hard. So you talk to your counselor about it, or talk to a trusted adult, or talk to a friend about it. I think also, and I think a lot of it, I think at this age, parents need to be involved in this a lot as well. And I think that's really important. And setting limits on screen time, checking their phone often, every app.
That's a challenge.
Yes.
Because you want to give them some autonomy and
Absolutely.
independence and privacy, but at the same time, you have to know what's going on in their world.
I think in 6th grade, I think yes.
Yeah.
I think when they're at that,
At that
just
age,
so
it's
many,
reasonable.
the amount of times and the things that we've seen, I think definitely in 6th grade, you're what?
I think too, I know we've spoken a lot about this, that since the pandemic, we're seeing younger kids with phones and with more access to the internet because of, because of the online education and just the socialization factor, because they couldn't get out and hang out with their friends. So their parents would say, okay, here you go. Like, text them, whatever, however you want to access them. So I think that that's been a big part for us too, because typically we didn't have 6th graders, not many with phones. So now we're seeing that a lot more. And I think that, being so young still at that age, I think that there's a huge need for that, oversight, because again, it's a whole other world that they just don't know how to navigate.
Right. And then just talk. So in 6th grade, I'd say, you're monitoring it like a hawk. You're opening every app. You're checking it with them. And they have to earn that autonomy, right? Right? Just like when you give your kids the keys to the car, right? You have to, be careful. You have to they have to earn that, right? They have to demonstrate that they know the skills, have taken the test, and that's the same thing. And, I have young kids too. My oldest is 9, and it's still, just entering this world. But, in our house, I know we're a lot more strict. But it's hard, though, because his friends have all of this, too. So I'm trying to have those meaningful conversations with my kids about that, too. It's really tough. It's tough for parents to navigate this, because it's also technology is so wonderful in so many ways too.
Right.
Just
So
this
I was
podcast.
gonna
I mean,
say.
you get so much information.
Right.
It's really hard.
But there are things that kids shouldn't really be aware of at certain ages.
100%.
And it's difficult. We've had other podcasts where we've talked about human trafficking and issues like that, just all the predators that can be out there. And you give a kid a smartphone, and that's like access for those predators potentially to that
I
child.
think it's
very
scary for the parents. It's like a balancing act. You're trying to balance safety with communication on one side, and then you're looking at like all the dark web stuff.
Right.
And how easy or how challenging is it for the parents to like block most of that and ensure their child's safety?
Yeah.
Especially as they start getting older, and it's then becomes more of a struggle with.
There's a lot of students that I've found, maybe I won't say a lot, but there's a good amount who will talk to me about their friends. And, I find out mid-conversation they've never met these friends. I mean, and they are their friends, like best friend.
Lives in Colorado.
Feel as though they have known this person inside and out their whole life. Devastated if something, happens to them. And the reality is you don't know what's happening to them. You don't know, what is true and what's not true. And that's so scary, I think. But for them, especially I think for some of the kids that struggle with finding the connections at school, they gravitate towards that, and that is so big for them. So it's definitely a tough world.
So what can parents do? Are there certain strategies that they can take? Or are there certain apps that they'll notice on the phone or websites that they'll see that the kids should definitely not go on? How do parents navigate this bullying world?
So I think, and we can give you some more resources about specific apps because they change all of the time. Like, there's calculators that open up into a social media site called Snapchat. There's
Snapchat.
right. So any if they're talking about any social media platform that involves connecting with other people, not just within their like immediate friend group, like on a larger scale, such as TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. There's a plethora of more of them that I don't even know, but they literally have a new one every day. I think it's, and I think taking charge of the phone, if you're paying for the phone, then you have limits on that, right?
Even just the time limits, the hour limits, because there are kids, if they have access to their phone all night, who will be up on their phone all night and then come to school, falling asleep in class or, just totally off. And, when you check in with them and they're like, well, I was on my phone, I couldn't sleep. And, before you know it, they've been up till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then they're getting to school at 7:30.
Now it's easy to check screen time. I mean, it's an automatic message.
Right. And I think the providers, the phone providers, have a lot of great tools. But there's also, and I unfortunately don't know any off the top of my head, but I know that there are certain apps with the parental controls for a lot of the social media.
Now, can you send us some of those resources so we can post those online?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Definitely.
Primacare is Southeastern New England's trusted leader in medical care. With offices in Fall River and surrounding communities, we're dedicated to your well-being. Our carefully selected team of more than 150 providers offers world-class primary and specialty medical care. Primacare doctors are supported by a skilled staff trained to deliver comprehensive radiology, imaging, and testing services. Primacare is large enough to take care of all your medical needs, but small enough to care for you personally. Primacare is by your side.
Yeah.
Now, what are some signs that the parents can pick up on if their kids are being bullied? Like, what are they going to notice?
I think this is where it gets really tough because in adolescence, in general, there's more. They're isolating to their room. They want more independence. There's more arguments at home, right? I think just a general, I think instead of looking for signs of bullying, you're looking for those signs of depression or anxiety surrounding social situations, right? So I don't want to go to the dance. They've always wanted to go to the dance. I don't want to go to the sleepover. I wasn't invited to the sleepover. They're usually always invited to the sleepover. I'm just as simple as they're up all night or they wake up really tired. Those types of things, if they're just acting off. And that's what's so difficult because every child is so different. And this is such a tough, adolescence is such a tough age anyway. But just not really having things that they're interested in, right? Having a hard time getting involved in groups, I think is another thing that you want to look out for. Poor performance in school. And I think even having the teacher, having the parent check in with the students, your child's teachers. They see those kids every single day. Or call the school counselor and say, hey, I don't know what's going on with my kid. They seem off. I know some of this is adolescence. We get these calls all the time. What happened to my kid, my baby? Some of that is just very developmentally normal. And sometimes there's something bigger going on. And just having those conversations with them daily, even if they don't want to talk to you, just, hey, I see you. Are you okay?
Don't be afraid of them.
Don't be afraid of them.
We were talking about that, don't be afraid of your teens. I know that they can be scary. We see them all the time.
They're
right?
little Johnny, what's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. And
the
that's
thing is, they change
So-
overnight. I swear to God, it's one day they're one person, the next day they're completely different.
Right. And I think
really
getting more
wild.
specific with your questions rather than how was your day, which is a very general question. Hey, have you been doing any group work at school lately?
Oh, that's
what project
great
are you
advice.
doing? Who did you sit with at lunch today? What did you eat for
Specific.
lunch? Be specific.
Because whenever I ask my daughter, how's your day? She's like, fine.
Right.
That's what the answer you get.
Yeah.
You have to, you have
It
to
gets
be more
to
specific.
what are you learning about?
Exactly.
And that because you're also showing a vested interest in them, which they love to talk about themselves, right? In some ways. So getting really specific or, hey, I haven't seen you hanging around with Chris lately. What's going on? I think those are all really important things. You're really modeling for them self-care So if you got to take care of yourself too as a parent. If you're not sure how to navigate it, go talk to someone, talk to another parent. How are you navigating this? I think oftentimes we think we're all alone in it, and you're not.
Right.
And
I think that is a big one too. Taking care of yourself so that you're able to be there for them,
Correct.
and they're ready to kind of come around too.
and also trying not to take their stuff personally, which is really hard.
Yeah.
And again, because that's just going to close off the conversation that could be you could be having with your teenager or middle schooler, and opening those conversations is going to open them up to whatever might be going on if something ever comes up. Because I don't think it's not about if they're going to have trouble during this time. It's when, not necessarily bullying. Not every child gets bullied. That's not what I'm saying. But just it's going to be tough, and they're going to experience setbacks. It's that time, and it's how they get through these is going to help them in their future.
So on one hand, I mean, you want to obviously be very sensitive to what they're experiencing and ask those questions and make sure that you're available as a resource to them and know what's going on in their world. But you want them also to be sensitive to the issue as far as how other kids are being treated too. So how do you have those discussions?
Yeah. So I've already had these discussions with even my own children. Just if, whether it's in school, on a sports team, be somebody who sticks up for somebody. If you see act, and it's age-old tale, treat others like you want to be treated. It's really hard when you're trying to be liked by a group of kids who you feel like you should be a part of.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the quantity of friends, it's those quality friendships.
Right.
And ask them, how many, who do you have one person you can talk to about, I often ask my students this, who's the person you can talk to about this stuff? And they'll name one or two. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. You have one or two people. So not, celebrating the fact that they have 50 friends or thousands of followers, or it's more or less the quality of those friendships. And, if you see something, you say something. It could be as simple as reaching out to that person personally, right? And at the end of the day, those students who are bullying, they need help too.
Right.
Right?
There's a
They're
reason.
struggling. There's something going on, like, for them to act like that. So maybe we need to check in with them.
Do kids who are bullied become bulliers often?
That's happened for sure. Absolutely. I think, and it might be something we weren't aware of, but I think it's more often than not, they don't have a lot of connection or love outside of school. I think sometimes that's what we see, or just having a hard time, attaching to their own caregivers for whatever reason, traumas, whatever it is. That's usually what we see. Because they're all children. Even the bully wants to be accepted and liked, and they can make a change, So I think,
What about parent-teacher conferences? I think some parents have in their mind that it's just academically, but they can have this conversation for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and, I know at our school, and I assume other schools as well, we're available during parent-teacher conferences. So parents, granted, we're always really accessible to parents because they can call us at any time. But it's definitely something, I mean, like Monique had said, the teachers are with the students the most, as far as time goes in a day. So they really get to see a lot of the ins and outs. I mean, we have teachers all day who are like, hey, do you see this student? I think that they're a little bit off today. Can you check in with them? And, we get a lot of that. So they're super aware and alert of what's going on. So I think that's a great way for parents to connect and to find out a little bit about how things are going in the classroom.
So if I kind of want to make that call to the school, do I ask to talk to their homeroom teacher or the school counselor, or where's my first step?
I mean, I think that the school counselor is probably the way to go because, again, they're more easily accessible than a teacher. And we do a lot of, reaching out for additional information, especially if it's a student we're not familiar with. You know, we need to gather some information from their teachers. And at least in middle school where we are, they have 6 teachers most likely or more.
Right.
You know, so that's a lot of information. And homeroom really is only a short period of time in the day. So it's good to have, you know, input from everybody for sure.
Right.
So we can kind of gather all that, which is nice.
Yeah, I think it's great. You know, schools have really adopted the school counseling thing. And now, you know, in the past 10, 20 years, it's more of it's not just vocational counseling.
Yeah.
That was what it was. It was, what are you going to be when you grow up? Now it's very holistic. You know, they have school counselors at the elementary school level now. So I'd say at the elementary school level, you just maybe touch base with the teacher first, because they see them all day long most of the time. But also know who the school counselor is and shoot them an email. It's so easy to connect with people, like Alyssa said. In middle school, just the counselor would be great.
It's great that this exists because, I mean, when I went to school, it was really more vocational counseling.
I know,
It was, you never really saw the counselor until I think in high school we were applying to college, and then you'd have a meeting or two, and you know, that was about it. But there was nothing else prior to that. But one thing I wonder about, you know, there's lots of different types of people out there. And, you know, there are people out there, parents out there who don't really understand the whole bullying concept. They're like, oh, they need to toughen up, or they're soft, or it's just society. No one can say anything bad anymore about it. I'm sure you run into this all the time. How do you deal with that? Because, you know, there's a lot of different views out there. And obviously bullying is very damaging. And sometimes I think there are adults who don't understand that and may actually support bullying behavior too.
Sure,
And,
they're
you know,
bullies themselves usually.
Right. And how do you deal with that as a counselor?
Yeah.
And I think you just equip the student with armor. There's, and again, controlling the controllables. We're not going to control someone's complete outlook on life in that sense. So your energy is going to go towards that family that's struggling, and obviously, you know, try your best to educate that family. And I feel like 9 times out of 10, whether they are just saying it to me just to say it, they usually can see where I'm coming from. If it's a parent with that, they might come off at first like, oh, I don't believe in this, or this, you know, this is ridiculous, or we need to toughen them up. But after you listen to them and speak to them and say, hey, listen, I understand where you're coming from, but we have a situation here.
Yeah.
And, you know, we gotta figure this out, because this isn't going to go well for you, for your child, for anybody. And they can usually get to a level playing field there. Whether that's how they think after the conversation or not, but we can at least work together. I feel like at least where we are, we can usually really, I think we have pretty good relationships with families.
That's great.
Can you share with us a story of a child who ran into some challenges and the conversations that you had and what the outcome was?
Yeah. Let's think. So, you know, there's been quite a few situations. I think one in particular, right? A lot of online, social media information that was put out there with some rumors and filtering into school, where even people that the student doesn't know are, you know, approaching. And so it definitely became a much bigger issue for the student. And so, you know, in working again as a team with the student, the parent, our assistant principal, you know, it didn't happen overnight, but things were certainly worked out to a much better place. And I think that, you know, the student and I had developed a really good relationship over that time. And so now, like, moving forward, there's, you know, there's that ability to kind of avoid the bigger situations, because you have that relationship already to, you know, really kind of nip things in the bud if there is anything that starts to kind of filter again. And again, you know, some of it is the normal teen stuff, you know, and then there's always like that extension where you're like, okay, this is more than that. So we really got to work together and come together to come up with a solution.
So those conversations, you're kind of gathering everyone together in the same room and talking with everyone, or do you talk with everyone a little separately to see kind of what everyone's story is?
Yes. So
Yeah.
in a bullying situation, you don't want to get the two students in the same room together. You want to make sure you treat them separately.
Okay.
And that's because of that power imbalance we talked about before. We do not want to disregard this victim's situation.
Put them in like a situation where they feel unsafe.
Or they feel like they have to now, a lot of times what they might not be able to be as truthful if they're in the presence of the bully.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's usually what we do. And it depends. Sometimes once we've established whether it's bullying or a conflict, then, again, we give our administration get involved. We usually, we meet with each party. And sometimes it's not just two people. It could be a group of people. We also try to gather as many witnesses as possible.
Yep.
That's really easy if you're on a group chat.
Right.
You can
You have them right
sometimes-
there.
Yeah. Sometimes we get our school resource officer involved as well, depending usually if it's cyberbullying, because as a school, and this is what I think is important too, is as a school, we cannot be the police of social media. It's, we can't do that.
impossible.
But we obviously want to know if things are happening online so we can then see how they filter in school. If we need to communicate something home that we feel like is dangerous, if the student is unsafe to themselves or others, that would be something we'd communicate home.
Monique, can I ask you about that, what you just said? Suppose it does happen after school hours. Like, what's the school, like,
So-
where's that line?
So usually what we do is, again, we usually wouldn't find out about it till the next day, right?
Right.
Whether it might come to us by, let me show you this screenshot. I can't tell you how many times we've got, let me show you this screenshot. I've seen so
I have the
many
screenshots. I have them. Let me go get
Then
my
go get
phone.
them. Let me go get my phone that you should have often in your
Yeah.
locker. But no, so usually, or a parent will call. And oftentimes, we'll take a look at it. If it's something, it depends on what it is, right? If it's, I look at it, I think it's more of a conflict. If they're going back and forth and it's not something that's repetitive over time, I might have the students come down and do a mediation. We might do that.
Right.
If it's something that I think has gotten way out of control and there's a victim here clearly, I will usually, I'll call the parent and, recommend that they connect with the police over that. That's usually what we do in that case. And then we obviously will monitor that and how that trickles down into school. Because you cannot be consequenced at school for your cyberbullying that happened on Saturday night.
Do parents understand that for the most
Sometimes.
part? Or are they?
I think, maybe not initially, but I think as a lot of different issues, the school is where they'll go first, right?
Okay.
Because that's either the neutral party.
Right.
It might be uncomfortable to call the parent.
Right.
They might not have that. They don't maybe feel comfortable doing that,
Right.
maybe because of the nature of the situation, or, they just feel like they need a vent. Right. And then we'll just, most of the time they understand that, but they're just in they want to solve this. They want, it depends on the situation. Some people want justice served. So that's usually what we do. You really want to empower the victim, right? So if we take that all away, they don't have to do anything. So even the parent in those situations, you want to empower them to stick up for their child as well. So going to the police, they have the powers to be able to do that, and we have the power to communicate that to the SR, our school resource officer. But we can't hand over the phone.
Right.
There's policies regarding that as well.
Course. Now, Alyssa and Monique, can you talk about some of the programs you have at school to?
Yeah. One of the things that we were so proud of, when I started back at the middle school in 2014, there was a student-led club that the kids, the year before I was there, these two students wanted to start this anti-bullying club. They weren't able to get off the ground when I started. This is like my first project. Was like into Alyssa and I, you guys have to get this up and running, which was so great. It's called Case Cardinals Care. It's morphed from student-led, really. We're just the advisors. So we kind of, make sure everybody's, we're doing fun things around the community. But it's started off as bring awareness to bullying. And then that kind of morphed into just let's spread kindness in the community. Because sometimes kids don't want to be part of a group called the anti-bullying group.
Yeah.
So we talk about bullying within the group, but we branded it differently to Case Cardinals Care. So we do a lot of different things. We spread awareness about a lot of different causes. We've done like little sticky notes in everybody's lockers that is like positive affirmations. We've done a lot of different things.
Did the like chalk drawings on the all the entrances to school with like positive messages and things like that last spring. That was really fun.
Yeah, we have a garden.
Yeah.
When we used to have the health fair, we used to have a booth at the health fair that would have like bullying facts, and kids could win like a prize on a wheel. But it's a great place for all different types of kids to come. I think kids like it because it's, you don't have to try out for it.
Low commitment.
You don't have to have
There's
some
fun things going
crazy
on.
talent, right?
You know what I mean?
And you feel, and it's inclusive.
Oh yeah, it's very inclusive.
There's a lot of kids that, again, don't really fit into the other like clubs or activities or sports, things like that. So we have, and then we have some who are in sports and theater and everything you can imagine. So it's really a nice mix of students who, all just want to do something nice and just, connect. So it's a good time. And we've done some fun things. We do a big donation for Hasbro. We've done many years, the holiday drive, and that's always really well received. And just any kind of information that we put up around the school. I mean, I think the kids really enjoy kind of coming together and doing those projects, which is really fun.
Yeah, we'll do like team building exercises too.
That's great.
I did yoga one time.
We did like a
self-care
seminar
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some meditation and yoga. That was
that was fun.
Isn't that great to have a coping like
We should do that next week. We should do that.
I mean, that's something that they can carry with them.
Forever. Right. And we do actually a coping skills lesson in the 7th grade that's very similar to that, which is like my favorite day of the year, where we go into the 7th grade and we'll like set up different stations, right? And so we'll talk about stress and, coping skills and how to handle setbacks and what are some things that you do. So they all do an inventory on what are some healthy ways to cope with a setback, or if this happens, what should you do? And then we'll have little stations, like we'll have putty and clay in like one, then we'll do a meditation in another, we'll do yoga at another station. Nice. There'll be like, puzzles, like small, easy puzzles to get, your logical brain thinking and not your emotional brain. So different things, and that's a fun day.
Do you think where there's been so much information out there about bullying and education that kids now are more willing to approach adults and say, hey, there's an issue going on here?
Absolutely. I definitely see even a change since we began so long ago. I've seen a difference, an uptick. I think not everybody wants to come down and tell us. We have a way in which students can get us if they don't want people to know. So they fill out a Google form for us, which can be anonymous, and we can then plan a time. Obviously, it's if an emergency, come right down. But if they have something more in depth they want to talk to us about, they can schedule a meet with us, which is great.
Our producer wants me to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay. If a parent felt like their child needs more help than just at school, can a parent reach out to the school counselor for assistance with finding some regular external counseling?
Absolutely.
Yep.
We have a lot of resources. Some I wish we had more one-on-one connections because of the way that, things are today. I think there's such a high demand. But really, sometimes it's just kind of the luck of timing when it comes to finding resources. I've had parents who have been on wait lists for months, and then I find, I see a name and we give it a shot and they get in that week, So I think just using all of your resources that you can, which is reaching out to the school counselors, because we typically do have a good amount, I think, of resources that we can share.
Yeah, we have a paper that we use, and we update it frequently because sometimes people go out of practice, or locations change, or they're not offering certain services anymore. So,
periodically too, we'll kind of check in to see like the wait times and things like that. I know, so that again, for those situations, where parents might be struggling to find some outpatient care.
Psychology Today is a wonderful resource too
Yeah.
if you're struggling with the list we provide. They usually have a really
Had a
great,
lot of good luck with psychology.
a lot of good luck because I think
independent practitioners.
they'll put themselves up when they are available and usually say if they're accepting
great.
new clients as well, which is great.
Yeah.
I would say look at your health plan too.
Health
We're
plan,
in open enrollment for a health
Yeah.
plan. When I was reading through it, it was like 24/7 mental health
Yeah.
Yeah.
assistance. I had no idea
Right.
that we had a number that I could
Right.
call to complain about you.
Nice. See, I told you I'd be bullied once on this show.
But
We can talk if you'd like.
Yeah, later on. I
Right
think
over
we'll have a
report.
conversation.
There
Oh my
is
gosh.
too, for more like urgent situations, there is a 24/7 number for a mobile crisis team in the area.
I think
So
depending
that
on your insurance though too.
is, yes,
Yeah.
depending on the insurance, but also at local hospitals, they always offer any kind of support for that. So there's always, that's always an option as well.
Yeah, we divide our list up into like crisis intervention and then, psychological testing or, one-to-one counseling. So,
If you know your child, and we're going to start wrapping up, but I did have one last question. I don't know
Sure.
if you have one
No,
last
go
question
ahead.
too, but if you know your child's more on the quiet side, is an introvert, maybe has difficulty making friends, is there something you can guide the child towards? Like, don't just say, hey, go try out for a sports team and make some
Right.
friends. Like,
Might
what avenues do those parents have to
know.
make it easier for their little introverted?
Yeah, it's tough. But I love our introverts because they're the best listeners.
Yes.
I think just highlighting those qualities that they have something to say. They probably have the most to say and are listening to everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that superpower might not be appreciated right now, but it will. Right. But I think getting creative, looking in your within your community, if there's something that might not be necessarily sports related, or check in with what clubs are at the school, whether it be photo club, getting involved in
Things
something.
like Case Cardinals Care.
Yes,
'Cause
thinking like
I'm
Case
sure
Cardinals
other
Care.
schools have, something
Yeah.
similar. And that's definitely,
Yeah.
we get a lot of parents, I think, who are like, you need to get my student in somewhere. They're not really a sports kid,
It's hard.
And so just whatever you can try, especially for those things, I think, where it's a low commitment to kind of get your foot in the door and kind of see, what the student.
And it's a feel good club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just going to automatically feel good.
I know
about
we have
yourself.
snacks usually. I know, and I think too. I struggle. A lot of parents who struggle with that introverted kid who is like, I just want to play video games, which is great. That's a part of what they like. And a lot of kiddos, most kiddos we know, it doesn't matter what you like, loves, like has a connection to that. I always tell them, like, as a person, as an adult, you want to be well-rounded. I show them like a little circle. You want this much you're spending with your family, academic, school, and then you have room for hobbies. You have room for video. You do have room for that, but you want to try other things because, you're not just going to always have video games, right? So just if they have some kind of special artistic talent or some kind of ability, just really hone in on that. Find a program for it within the community,
But every child has some type of interest or
Yeah.
something they're really
Exactly.
good at.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of
Hone in on it.
and
Yeah.
hone in on it,
And
right?
it takes some kids longer than others.
Right.
And I think as they get older in high school, there's more opportunities to get involved.
Or different
in middle
avenues, kind of.
Right. In middle school, they start doing drama and theater. In our community, that's a really big thing that kiddos do, whether it be musical.
And I think even like within those things, I know we have some kiddos who get into like the theater program who would never get on stage, but they're into like the tech type stuff.
That's
they're
right.
into
Right.
the art
Right.
stuff.
The
They
movie
do
production.
the
they have that.
costumes,
Yeah.
the makeup, so
Yeah.
there's so many different types of kids that we get in there, who wouldn't normally be
Right.
like, oh yeah, sign me up for drama, so really kind of thinking a little bit more outside the box in those situations of like, what can we do?
Yeah.
It's amazing when they're that age to see them develop their interests
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
realize that now they're heading towards becoming adults,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's fascinating.
It is. It's
Right.
really
It
cool to
changed
see.
so much during
Right,
that
it
time
is.
period.
Yeah, and I'd say too, even if they're not a super athlete, but they kind of like to play football or they kind of like to play baseball or soccer, doing a rec league. They don't have to play for the school.
Right.
Just learning to be on a team of whether it be the debate team or the math club. Learning to be on a team in general is going to be really helpful for that introvert.
Right.
So, Monique and Alyssa, as we kind of wrap this all up, is there one message you'd want to leave with, let's say, those who are watching, many of which are parents, who are watching this show?
I think I already said it, but I think talk to your kids.
I was going to say be open, listen without judgment as much as possible. I think, leave that room for them to come to you when they need it too. They might not have the words at that moment, but knowing that they can come to you at another point in time, I think is huge and, definitely received well.
And try to, I'm not perfect at it either, but trying to emulate or try to show it. You're their role model. So if you're not feeling good, you have to do some self-care as well.
Yeah.
So if you're struggling with this stage too, like many parents do,
Mm-hmm.
talk to another parent friend about it. Say, are you experiencing this too? Don't isolate yourself too. You're not alone. And there's many different ways to parent kids.
Sure.
There's no one right way at all. And every kid is different. So what works for one is not going to work for the other. So I think, just, loving them and they'll come back to you. And just, really, help them with those coping strategies, I think.
Yeah. So be aware of
aware.
what's going on in their lives,
Yeah.
be available.
Yeah.
And
If you see them like
important
on their
things.
phone, hey, let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
Like emulate those same things that you might do if you're struggling with that.
Okay. Perfect. That's great. This has been wonderful.
Yeah.
I learned a
having
lot.
us.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
so
great.
much.
No, it's an
fun.
important message to get out there, and I think that everyone listening will definitely appreciate it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure learn a lot.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come here. And I want to also thank our sponsor, Bay Coast Bank, which is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. And thank you for all of you for listening to our show and supporting us. And special thanks to Ron Gamache for our intro music and the PC Institute for producing our show. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.